What I'd like to do with you right now is to share a little story about investigating sound with first graders and my experiences around that. This all happened before COVID, but many of the ideas could be applicable in an online setting. And we're going to try to talk about ways and strategies that you might do that. And one thing I'm hoping is that this little piece can be as interactive as possible. So I'd like to invite you to put comments, questions, ideas about how you might build on or change these ideas for your particular setting in the chat box. For young kids, some more basic concepts really needed to be explored prior to thinking about how sound travels, which is really what you were exploring with secret bells and head harp. And so I introduced this lesson by writing the question, what is sound? And as a focus question for an investigation with young students. And underneath that, we said, that's a big question. What is sound? To try to figure out what is sound, let's try to think about how do we start sound and how do we stop sound? And you can see those questions are reflected on this Padlet right here, which you could use in lieu of chart paper and if you're using some kind of asynchronous platform. But to answer these questions, we explored really simple vibrating things that made sound, such as a rubber band around a cup, a ruler on the edge of a table, and many of these items are pretty easy to find. So it could be that students collect them and then explore with you online, like you did earlier today, or with a sibling, an adult, or even a pet at home. Kids could take pictures and upload them to a platform like Padlet, or they could just practice saying to someone at home what they saw that helped them find out more about sound. And maybe they share those ideas with you in an online class meet. Kids might need help sharing some of these photos, but the Padlet you see here is an example. Parents could, or an adult or a sibling could write some text based on what the child is saying, or they could just have photos up there that could be used as a basis for discussion, and teachers could write the text that the child is saying as the picture is shared. But these pictures and student quotes show a number of ideas and language that teachers can use to develop the idea that a vibration is when something is moving back and forth. One of the students talked about numbers jumping up and down on the ruler, or there was lots of talk about things wiggling and squiggling. And that was all really rich language that we could use to develop this idea of what a vibration is. And we had a science talk to share and try to make sense of our results from this investigation. And I used a progression of questions that worked really well. I asked them to start off by talking about how did they make sound. So they talked about pushing or pulling on something, like pulling on the rubber band and seeing it vibrate, and they could hear something. Or when they pushed on the ruler, the numbers jumped up and down and they could hear a sound. And then we talked about ways that they stopped sound. And a really important idea came out from the students, which is that when you stop the vibration, for example, when you pinch the rubber band, this is something Maria was talking about earlier, you stop the sound. So the second they stopped the vibration, the sound stopped. They could no longer hear anything. And that was very compelling evidence for them that sound is a vibration. Or some kids said vibration makes sound, or some kids said sound makes vibration. And that was a great beginning idea here. Yeah, and Ashley's sharing this idea of using the microphone option, speech to text, when sharing observations. And that's a great tool to use. Thank you. And yeah, and it works really well for kids who struggle with the writing. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, if you will. So then we were ready to explore how sound gets to our ear. And to do that, we explored sound traveling through solid materials to really help these young students develop ideas about how sound travels from the source where we started to our ear. And you, again, could do these activities online like you did today. You could even use head harp and secret bells, or you could do these activities in an asynchronous fashion where students maybe work with a partner or practice talking to a partner, a sibling, or even a pet, and then come prepared to share ideas. We used very simple materials. Students can take a pencil or a pen and bite on it and tap on one end of the pencil, and they're able to feel the vibration moving through their jaw. Or they could put their head on a desk and tap on the desk or a table. Another tool is to put their finger on the outside of the ear, kind of like how you did when you were holding your secret bells, and just tap on the end of their elbow. And that provides a lot of interesting sensations through the arm and then into the ear. And the value of all of these activities is that the students can really feel the vibrations in their body. And so when we talked about this, they talked about their vibrations were traveling through their jaw, their vibrations were traveling through their arm. They could feel the vibrations in their head. They used a lot of the same evidence that you were sharing earlier. We have a couple pictures of telephone here, 2 cups with a string through them, which is, secret bells is sort of like the individual version you could try. But that was a particularly valuable tool to test. And if your students have the capacity to do it, it's a fun way. They really enjoy it, number one. And number two, they can feel the string vibrating when they touch it. So that was a further piece of evidence that vibrations were traveling across that string. And when they pinched the string, the sound stopped. And that was also very compelling. They could prevent the other person from hearing something by pinching the string. So let's, Kelsey, if we can go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the science practice of modeling and how that can support informational writing. So when I was working with the students, I gave them a piece of paper with some of the elements of their system drawn on. Like, for example, in this one for kids who were investigating with the telephone, I drew the face and the ear and the cups and the string. And I did that to make it a little easier for them to just focus on how they might communicate their ideas about how that vibration or how the sound is traveling from the source or the start of the sound to our ear or the receiver or end, sometimes they would say, of the sound. We all know as science folks that the practice of modeling is an important way for students to make sense of their investigation. The act of drawing and speaking and or writing helps students articulate their ideas for themselves, and it also helps them communicate those ideas to others. And a great way to do this in an online setting is to do it as an interactive writing lesson. So we're going to try experimenting with that a little bit. And we're going to try to focus our work on using a great strategy for informational writing with young students, which is to plan it, sketch it, say it, and then write it. So we're going to try to sketch in an interactive way some of our ideas about how we would describe how sound gets to our ear, or how we would show how sound gets to our ear. So let's take a few moments to plan it, to think about how you would describe how sound gets to your ear. And Kelsey's going to call up a Jamboard. And then when you're ready, if you would either type in the chat box or unmute and share some ideas, what sorts of things could we sketch to help us share our ideas about how the sound gets to our ear? Kelsey's drawing some arrows up there. And Kelsey, we have a suggestion of squiggly lines. Can you talk a little bit more, Lisa, about the squiggly lines? Where do you think we should put them, and where should we start them?
Well, I was thinking the squiggly lines would start at the mouth and go down the string to the ear.
Ah, okay. And that describes both what some of the first graders said and also what I think I heard some of the adults in today's session saying, that the sound was traveling through something, so that it starts with the source or the mouth and then goes through the cups and then the string. What other ideas can we use to add to our sketch? I'm hearing a couple of ideas. Amber's suggesting maybe some talk lines from the mouth. And Danielle and Maria saying sound out of the mouth, maybe some lines exiting the cup and into the ear. And so let's see, Kelsey, if we can try to get a couple of those ideas. Oh, this is interesting. So the sound, it looks like the sound vibration is coming out from the cup and going in a lot of directions into the ear. Using the audio symbol, the 3 lines. The poor kids are used to that one by now. So by 3 lines, can you describe a little bit, Trisha, and maybe Amber, these are connected to some of your ideas. Would those 3 lines look like how Kelsey's drawing them, or would you describe them differently?
No, like the ones that if they're accessing a read aloud and they can push that little symbol with the 3 little lines, they would recognize that instantly now, I think.
That's great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, you go ahead, Kelsey.
I was going to say, I'm trying to call that image up in my mind, and I'm not sure that I can, but I love that I'm even seeing a couple other people annotating this as well. So please feel free. Yami, you might have done something around the throat, which looks awesome. The lines pointing to the throat. So that's great.
And it's showing, like, parentheses, I think, is the symbol.
Nice. That's great.
And so you can see there's a lot of different ways students can sketch their ideas. And there's actually a lot of rich conversation you can have about how are we going to show that vibration. So the difference between squiggly lines and then the 3 sort of parentheses lines, those are different, but we're using them to communicate a similar idea. And often in expository text, students will encounter images that are very different, but are communicating the same thing. Oh, look, and we've got a brain here, and the sound is going from the ear to the brain. That's wonderful, which really gets at this information processing. You know, once the brain gets the message, then the brain has to interpret it and make decisions about what actions to take based on that. So, that's great. So maybe, yeah, Maria, I really appreciate that there's so many different ideas presented on the same sketch too. We're showing arrows with directionality. It's important. I feel like one of the important ideas folks are communicating is that the vibrations start at the source and then travel through the material. Nobody said the cup moves to the ear. It's just the vibration that moves to the ear. And so maybe we can try the say it and the write it part of this informational writing. Kelsey can pull up a little text box for us. And if someone would be willing to maybe say a description of what we've drawn here or part of what we've drawn here to get us started, we can practice the say it part. We've got a suggestion in the chat box for some labeling of our diagram, which is terrific. We could write source. We could say at the mouth, and we could put detector at the ear. And we could use other words for detector too. We could put, you know, sometimes first graders would say the end of the sound, or we actually use the word, the part that gets the sound getter. And so we've already got some text in here, and sound receiver. Thank you, Adrian. We could add receiver there. So we've already got some informational text that we're adding in the form of labels to our drawing. And that could be plenty for one session. You could come back in a later session and in an interactive way, try to write a sentence or two. Maybe something like the sound vibrates from the mouth through the string to the ear. That might be something that kids could work out in an interactive writing session that the teacher could then be recording. The sound wiggles. The sound jumps up and down. Maria's asking, does the cup vibrate too? I did not hear the children describing the cup as vibrating. They really felt the string vibrating, but it would be really interesting to try that ourselves and see, could we feel any vibrations in the cup? I'm not sure they actually tried touching the side of the cup with their finger, but when they touched the string gently with their finger, they were amazed that they could hear the vibration. We could label the string as a sound conductor. This is great. We're getting so many rich ideas on this one drawing, and so many rich pieces of words, vocabulary, excuse me, which is really exciting. And I'm wondering if folks can take just maybe a minute or two in the chat to share. Could you see using a strategy like this with young learners? What are your reactions? Could you modify it in some way? Is there some way you think doing some kind of interactive modeling or sketching and writing might work with the young learners with whom you work? Label and make models all the time with case students. The thing that's great, I think, about an interactive session like this is there's so many different ways to communicate this idea of a sound vibration moving and traveling. And so now the kids are starting to develop a bank of ideas of ways they can sketch and communicate their ideas. And maybe the sketching can help keep their attention, which is a challenge in an online environment. Yeah, the template sketch, I appreciate that comment, Maria. I felt that the template sketch was really helpful because it allowed them to focus their drawing on their ideas about the vibration and not on trying to make a face or a mouth. Really isn't about the artistic representation of an ear and a mouth. It's really about our ideas about how sound gets to the ear. Yeah, by all means, share the template sketch over Google. I wish I was a better illustrator. I feel like it's kind of a funny looking sketch, but you are more than welcome to use it. Yeah, and they don't get stuck on, I don't know how to draw. Yes. And art and math and science isn't the same, it's different than an art class. There's a different purpose. And so I really appreciate your communicating your ideas with me. Yeah, and yes, students moving their body from one side of the room to another, modeling the sound. And we actually in person did some modeling of sound vibrations, and that was an activity the students really enjoyed. Yeah, a long chat, Jamboard. Thank you, Henry. Yeah. Okay, I think that we should move to the next slide because I actually just wanted to share a few more ideas with you. Oh, and I don't know, it looks like my image is covering, it doesn't look like that on my home screen, but what I'm seeing projected is that my image is covering some of the text. So I'm sorry about that. But I just wanted to show you some actual drawings and sketches, some models that first graders have created. And so, and another thing I invite you to think about is, oh yes, I can repeat it. Plan it, sketch it, say it, write it. And so that's a great way for young learners to get their ideas about informational text onto the page. And so this is an image from a first grader, and you can see some similar ideas like the parentheses lines in the cup and squiggly lines in the string. And one great thing that I have found with young readers and writers and scientists is to use student models as mentor texts. And so using the reflective questions, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Is a great way to invite young readers and writers to look at what information is this author trying to tell me about how sound travels. And Kelsey, could you click on the text there? So this particular student is saying the sound comes out of your mouth, it gets squished in the string, and then there is more space in the cup at the end. And so that student sketched and said it. So a next step could be to try to get some of that writing on the page. And then let's just show one more image of first grade text as a way of closing this particular section of the workshop. Another student wrote, these are pictures, I don't know if you can tell, it's a hand touching a rubber band around a cup. You can have a small sound or a big sound. A big sound is a big push. Yeah. So let's end on Tracy's notes saying, if we say it, then we can write all about it. So thank you all for participating with me in this activity. I really, really enjoyed hearing your ideas.